Welcome into another episode of our Cubs REKAP Podcast, a presentation of our REKAP YouTube channel and available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. It's brought to you by our great partners at the Illinois Tollway, the If Only campaign. Hey, folks, quick time out. Talk about something serious. We've all said it before. If only I had slowed down. The campaign is called If Only. Lives, including yours, depend on it. With my partner, Gordon Wittenmeyer, I'm David Kaplan. Our special guest was the GM of the Mets, front office of the Baltimore Orioles. Now he's a star on MLB Network Radio, does Mets pre and post. He is Jim Duquette. Thank you for taking time for us, Jim. So much going on with our Cubs. I figured reach out to a guy who did this job. How do you handle what the Cubs are going through, bullpen issues, and your top starter done for the year?
It's a tough spot to be, especially this time of the year, even when you thought you had enough depth. And I remember talking to both Jed Hoyer and Craig Counsell during spring training. I know you guys have too. And they were like, oh, yeah, we got plenty of depth. You know, no one ever has enough depth with starting rotation, but they felt like they did and had some coverage. Obviously, with Assad out, it's not great. There's at that time, Brown, they weren't sure what was going to happen with him. He's in the rotation. So, the long story on this is when you have an injury this early and it's the season-ending one, those are ones that you don't plan for. You plan for like an IL stint for a couple of weeks here or there, a spot starter here and there. But these, especially when he's one of your best starters in Steele, you start to look at, all right, how do I get through the short term? How do I get through, let's say, the next couple of weeks, which they've kind of tried to outline, and they have a bunch of off days, whatever. But then you start to look ahead to the trade deadline. And the hard part on that is you can't speed up the trade deadline because there's just not anybody available, even with the teams that are in the rebuild mode.
Well, Jim, you began to allude to this a little bit, but when you look, if you're sitting in Jed's seat right now, say the day before you got the diagnosis on Justin Steele, how do you feel about your off season at that point? With what you had seen so far in the season, would you feel like you did enough?
No, and I think you kind of go back, and I've said this on my own radio show. Matthew Boyd was a necessity for added depth, but they really needed another starter in my mind, and one that maybe fit in between Imanaga and Taillon, what Taillon did last year, that number 2 type starter. And it was expensive. It was going to cost you a lot of money, and there weren't a ton of available out there, but they should have been in the mix there. But it seemed like there was a limited amount of dollars, and so they had to kind of rearrange it a little bit. And they had a good off season, but I really felt like they were poised to have, if they had an excellent off season, they might be in a little bit different situation right now and have coverage and not have to go out and make a trade and give up some of your top prospects.
So if you decide, okay, we're in first place and we're going to go get Sandy Alcantara, it's going to cost you prospects. The money isn't obscene. Jed has been clear that he has, as he calls it, dry powder for what he needs. How soon does a guy like that get moved?
So the hard part with Alcantara, looking at it from the Marlins side of things, and with Peter Bendix as their president of baseball operations down there, he's not back to 100%. If you're an acquiring GM, like the Cubs need him, there's a bunch of teams that need him, but you want to see him pitch more. You want to see him go 100 pitches. You want to see him go 7 innings or more, because you're going to have him under control for the next couple of years. That's where his value is. But you're also trying to acquire number 1 starter. And the Marlins, they have to trade him like he's a number 1 starter, but he hasn't shown he's that guy yet, right? So that's the in-between part that's really hard, is you're impatient, you need the guy, you're willing to be in the conversation, which the Cubs will be. That conversation, there will be more than 1 or 2 conversations, I'm sure of it, in the deal, but you can't give up that number, what it would take to get a number 1 starter yet, because there's some risk there with Alcantara. He could get re-injured. He may not find his command for a while. Eventually he will. I don't know if it'll be this year though. That's the other part of it. So, to give up the type of talent, and when I say talent, you wouldn't give up Matt Shaw because he's with your major, obviously he's in AAA, but he's your top guy and you have a need there. But every other guy in your system maybe even Cade Horton would be in the conversation on this, because you're getting this type of guy back. So before you give up a Horton, well, you better know that Alcantara is going to be what you've seen of him in the past.
Yeah, so that brings up like the next question. We know they have some in-house crapshoots that they can throw out there and see if something sticks while they try to get through things short term. But if you feel the need, you're in a position right now where you're in first place by a couple games. Right. You're playing a tough part of your schedule. You know this guy's out for the rest of the season. This division is there for the taking. What could you do? What might there be to do from outside the organization? Now, we saw Arise get traded early May last year, same team we're talking about. Right. But that's not really common. Are there incremental moves? Guys left on the free agent market. Lance Lynn said he retired. Maybe you get him out of retirement. Maybe you get lightning in a bottle for a month. I don't know. Is there something that you would be pursuing?
So, yeah, I think that's the interesting part. So, I think there were a couple guys that were out there, either starters or relievers, and listen, that brings up, the relief issue too, that right now it's showing itself with the Cubs too. But, the best reliever out there right now is David Robertson. He's held out and still would like to pitch, and he's had a track record, and, yes, he's older, but he'd be a guy, he wants to get paid similarly to what he got paid last year, which I think was north of $10 million. So, that might be a non-starter. It has been for most teams at this point. But there are ways to address your pitching, but there's just not like Kyle Gibson was available till a couple weeks ago, and the Orioles grabbed him. You mentioned Lynn. You might be able to convince Lynn to come out of retirement, but I just saw him interviewed recently. He said, he's looking to get paid, like what he feels like he deserves. So, that's the hard part with some of these guys who've made money that are close to retirement is they're not coming back for a couple $1 million. They're not going to do you any favors. So, and they're really, outside of trying to talk to the Mariners and give up an offensive player for one of their starting pitchers, like a guy who's making money like Luis Castillo, and I don't even think he's available, but you can try to persuade him, because he could save some money and get some offensive pieces. It's like AJ Preller with San Diego, as you mentioned, they have a bunch of injuries where they don't have any depth now with their starting rotation. The White Sox have a bunch of younger guys, as you guys know, that's really hard. So, there's really not an available guy that I see anyway that you could go out and get in the short term. I think that upgrade has to come from within.
All right, so talk to me then. Kyle Tucker's in the final year of his deal. The Cubs, from what I'm being told, and I've been around that team for 30 years, Gordon was around it for 20 of them, they want him to stay here. Do you approach him now? Do you talk at the All-Star break? I don't think you can let him get the free agency. And here's the other question. Do you have to be more aggressive before the trade deadline because your top two prospects are outfielders, Kevin Alcantara and Owen Casey? I can't trade my top two young outfielders if I can't keep this guy in. So does that factor into it?
Yes, all of those things factor in. You're really in a difficult spot because, a couple years ago, the Mets traded for Lindor with 1 year left in the contract, and they made it known to him right away they wanted to try to sign him. They signed him early on. It was a deal that was expensive, and it hurt. But now it looks like it's a bargain by comparison. And, the deal or the time to get Tucker on any type of what would look like a deal, and I'm saying a deal like a $300 million deal, that's gone. Now that Vladimir Guerrero has signed, Tucker's going to be comparing himself to that. Not that the age is a little off. It's like he's like under 2 years of age, older, 2 years more, I think, in terms of, closer to, let's say retirement, to the age that Vladdy would be.
Yeah, Tucker will be 29 in January.
Right. And Vladdy, I think, is going to would have turned 27, I think, coming up. Yep. So, I think that you're going to, his agency, if Tucker has a season like he started out and it's a, typical Kyle Tucker year, he's going to, with a straight face, try to compare himself to Guerrero, and maybe not in the years, but the length
AAV.
of it, right?
Yeah,
sure.
36,
so
37.
That's going to be pushing. It's going to be over $400 million. So the question is, can you get a deal before that? That's in high threes. that's where it would be hard for him to say no, but I think that would have to be an initial
What do you
offer.
think he would say? And if you were his agent, if Jed called his agent, I think it's Excel, and said, okay, right now, 10 years, AAV of 37.5, what does Tucker say?
I think he'd have a hard time turning that down. He might say no because he thinks he can squeeze a little bit more money out of you. And he thinks, if you're willing to give you a first offer at 375 mil or whatever it is, you'd be willing to go to 400, like that initial offer is such a difficult one to make because you want it to be aggressive. But now you're setting the floor when he's going to be out there in the free agent market. So you have to try to have a sense of, does he like it there? Is he willing to even discuss this? If he's not, then you got to wait. So you're not bidding against yourself. But I suspect that if you went to him with a reasonable conversation, they're pretty reasonable. It's going to have to be aggressive. You just say, listen, we want him here. Let's have this conversation. I think 375 would be in the ballpark. It might have to go to 400 though to get him.
Yeah, that's my take on it, right? Like 37.5. If that's your offer, that's a starting point, right? And if it's 375 and 10, 37.5 a year, 25 more puts you, on an 11th year at 400. Starts with a 4. Let me ask you this, Jim. I bet you're inside on this a lot more than I am, having been there. But I talked to some executives in spring training about how the offseason was impacted by sort of the saber rattling of the upcoming CBA talks. And we saw a lot of teams hold back. I think the Cubs were one of those. I don't think that there's much debate there. So if you're talking about the Cubs going forward with a guy like Kyle Tucker, how much from their standpoint is a possible shutdown or rules changes to the finances of the game in play? And I'll just throw this out there. It seems to me the teams that have gone aggressive and gotten these big contracts done, they might be in better shape on the backside of any rules changes, what we're talking about, salary caps or whatever, because they're going to get grandfathered in.
Yeah, that's going to be, there will be a fight among owners on how they handle this salary cap. Like you said, if they do grandfather some of those teams in, which I think would be fair to assume. But I think if you're the mid and small market clubs, there's no incentive for them to say, okay, go ahead and we'll grandfather you in just to have the salary cap. But I do think the only way they can get agreement among themselves is to grandfather in those large market teams, and find a number that works for the Dodgers and the Mets and the Yankees and all those luxury tax violators, Phillies, Boston's this year, like any of them that are over $270 million payroll wise. So, but I do think, getting back to the original thought too, I do think that with some teams, maybe the Cubs, that the impending, let's say, lockout would affect some teams. I think there's other teams like the Mets and the Dodgers that are going to look at it as an opportunity. So if teams sit out on a Kyle Tucker, they might just jump in, and see if they can get themselves a really good player for a little bit less than what they originally thought. So like that's the hard part. If you're going to make a decision based on over a year from now, and by the way, there's a lot of things, even though I tend to agree that it looks like there'd be a lockout, and if they're going to demand a salary cap, we're going to miss games, in 2027, because the players aren't going to go for it, at least for a while. I think that's a tough way to operate your club, because they're not going to sit out 2 years or 3 years, and eventually you're going to get back on the field and play. And don't you want a guy like Kyle Tucker, whoever, even if you missed one season? Like, to me, that would be a bad plan, in my opinion, to sit it out just because the CBA there may be a lockout.
Hey, that's one way to give him a $400 million contract and get him for $370.
Yes. Hey, you would get a discount, wouldn't you? For a year. Hey, don't laugh, but there are some owners, and I worked for a couple of them, that would have looked at it that way too. Let me tell you. No, they would rather not play and not have to pay him than have to pay them and see the field. There are some owners that think that way.
The Cubs' schedule was crazy. Japan, they played the Dodgers already in LA. They played the Diamondbacks in Arizona. They played the Padres at home and in San Diego. They don't play another game starting after 7:10 Central till August the 22nd. So they've gotten a bulk of that past them, and yet they're in first place in their division. What do you think of that team?
Well, I think for me, there's a couple of early tests that you have in a season. And, for me, the first month is always like, you don't want to, you can't win say you can't get to the postseason by having a good April, but you can knock yourself out of contention in April, right? If you have a bad month. So you want to make sure, even when you're looking at the schedule, like the Cubs had, like they were one of the teams that I circled and was wondering, what are they going to be? Where are they going to be at the end of April? If they could be around 500, you'd feel good about it, especially with how many of the good teams they were playing. Now that you bank those wins and you are where you are, and hopefully you stay above 500, that's a huge advantage for the rest of the division, and really in the National League. So I viewed them, even when I was there in spring training, as one of the best teams in the National League, one of the top 6 or 8 teams in the National League. And what they've shown me is what I felt and hoped they were going to be. But obviously that they're going to have to address the Steele injury. That really changed the equation. The urgency on replacing him has now become a bigger need.
In terms of Cade Horton, everyone I talked to said that dude could be a number 1 starter at some point in his career, but he's never thrown 100 innings in a season. So how do you manage that? Even if he's throwing well at Iowa, do you say, I'm going to use him as a reliever? Do you say, we'll wait till July 1st, bring him up, and only let him throw X number of innings? How do you handle him?
Yeah, in my mind, there's only 2 ways to handle it. And the first way, I don't particularly like. The first way is to bring him up whenever you think he's ready and use his innings as much as you can. And then when you run out of the projected innings, put him in the bullpen. I don't like that as much. I think the way to control his innings would be in the minor leagues still. You got a couple other guys that you want to maybe give opportunities to. Let Wicks get an opportunity, even though it wasn't great last year. Give him a couple starts at the side, maybe, a couple other guys opportunities, and limit Cade's innings in the minor leagues, and then bring him up in June and just take the leash off. Let him pitch all the way through. If he's pitching well, let him pitch all the way through. Let him pitch in the postseason. That to me would be the bigger preference. That whole Strasburg thing when they shut him down like that, back in whatever it was, 2012, that was a disaster. It didn't keep him healthy at the end of the day. We don't have any real answers, but if you're going to limit his innings, I think you're better off doing it in the minor leagues, away from the spotlight.
So as an executive, under the circumstances with Steele out and all that they're facing now, how much temptation is there to maybe speed up that clock a little bit, maybe even sometime in May?
Well, the temptation is real because, I think even with him, if the quality is there, and I know Craig Counsell would pick his spots, and maybe not stretch him out to, and have him go that extra inning. Sometimes you see in the start, oh, he's pitching well, I'll let him go a 7th inning. You'd be more conservative and take him out after 6 or whatever it might be. Like in your manager, by the way, is going to push you too. Like, hey, if he's ready, bring him up. I'll protect him. That's what they tell you, But at the end of the day, there's
still when you got a 1-0 lead in the 7th, you're like, let him go.
Yeah, right, and your bullpen's iffy. Like, are you really going to take him out in that situation and go to somebody who hasn't been pitching well? Like, there's so many variables there. So, I think that's going to be the real hard part is Craig going to start calling for him in May? And he might. And you know what? At that point, I've talked to a lot of GMs around the game and like, there's no real answer here. I think that you just kind of eyeball, watch him, be careful with the workload and don't put any limitations on him. That's a third way to look at it. Those generally haven't gone all that well either.
So we had Jed sitting right here in this studio. He's a great dude. We've known him since he got here.
Yep.
Awesome. He said, I would be doing a disservice if I was trying to bring guys in just to save my job because I'm in the final year. And Gordon asked him, should this year factor into your getting an extension? He said, of course it should. I've had 5 years. If we don't win, that should factor into it. So how does he convince his owner, all right, we got to go for it here in July. We're 3 games up, and I'm trading from the strength of the system.
Yeah, I think that, he's already had
3
that
games up in July.
conversation.
You have
right?
to, right?
Yeah, I mean that's.
Yeah, he's already had that conversation, I think, with the owner, right? Hey, that's why he talked to you guys about having some powder available to go out and make a deal. I think he has to go out and make a deal and trade a couple of his top prospects. I don't think there's any question, not just to save his job. I think just to get to the postseason. I think they both felt, Counsell and Hoyer both said, hey, listen, this organization has gone too long without getting into the postseason. This year should be the start of many years where you're seeing them, in back-to-back or 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5 postseason appearances. Like, it's gone on way too long that they haven't been there in consecutive seasons or just there in general.
Yeah, speaking of which, the NL Central, right? You talked about this a little bit earlier, but have you seen enough of enough baseball so far this year to have maybe even a better idea of what that division looks like than you did in spring training, and whether it's weak enough, soft enough, whatever you want to say, to be more survivable under the circumstances for the pitching staff?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it's a little weaker by comparison to the NL East and the NL West for sure. I think you have to look at yourself within the division. How do you stack up? First, this short period of time, how do you stack up with the other teams in the Central? I think they're the best team in the Central. I'm going to get a look at the Cardinals this week. But I think their Brewers and Cubs will be the 2 teams that are standing there right around the deadline. But then you got to, as the deadline gets here, you got to look at yourself comparatively to the other teams, so you stack up in the postseason. That's why they're going to have to make a trade.
All right, before we let you go, your thoughts on Seiya Suzuki, your thoughts on Michael Busch at first base, Shota Imanaga, those 3 guys, because those for me, and Tyone obviously being a veteran has to keep pitching well, but those other 3 guys for me are huge keys.
Yeah, they are. I think, Suzuki, keeping him healthy, I think he'll be good on the offensive side. I think that's really, to me, just more than anything else. I have a belief, in watching him. I think he doesn't get mentioned enough with the Cubs. So I think he's going to be important, but just keeping him, getting his at bats, I think is going to be important for the offense as a good complement to Tucker. Busch, on the other hand, I've been really impressed. I thought he was an underrated player last year when they acquired him, and man, I watched his first couple of games at first base, and I was scratching my head. I'm like, I don't know how that's going to work. By the middle of the season, he was really good over there. So I'm not worried about the D. I think the offense has come a long way. So I'm bullish. I'm bullish on him. Obviously, Imanaga, the attention's on him. He's going to have to be their number 1 guy. I'd like to see somebody I'd like to see them give him some support, some help as another rotation piece. But he surprised so many people last year, and I think he's capable of doing the same. So they are key guys to me. I think that the strength of the Cubs offense, though, for me was some of those younger guys like Busch, like Pete Crow Armstrong and Amaya. Like, that's what they'll hopefully show the depth of it, because I know those top guys will do their job. I just don't know about the bottom third.
Well, so Kap says that those 3 guys are his keys to making sure that they can tread water. Who's your key?
Boy, that's a good one. Usually when I'd like to go on a starting pitcher outside of Imanaga, Cubs really don't have it. So I'm gonna go with the Cubs bullpen, because if their pen doesn't pick it up, you can give me any type of offense. You can give me a good starting pitch, and if you can't hold these leads, it's going to look ugly. So I'm going to kind of pick a more general, bullpen. But I love Presley and I love Hodge, and I wouldn't be shocked if at some point Craig may flip flop those guys. I love Hodge, the way he's looked so far and his stuff, how nasty he is. But either way, I think they need to address that bullpen even more. So I want to go with the Cubs pen.
Nice.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Take care of my guy, Mike Farron, your partner. It's my old producer.
I'll do my best. It's a heavy lift, but I'll do my best on that one.
It's a heavy lift. You're the best. We appreciate your time.
All right.
Thanks,
see you
Jim.
guys. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Thanks a lot. There he is, Jim Duquette. That guy's
knows
really
his stuff,
good.
Man.
Knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And, of course, our Cubs podcast brought to you by the Illinois Tollways If Only campaign. We've all said it before. Only I had slowed down. The Illinois Tollways new campaign is called If Only, and it's a powerful reminder that speeding just doesn't just put you at risk. It affects everyone on the road. Every crash leaves someone wishing they'd done things differently. So please, 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 we so appreciate you listening. We want you to be safe. Please take the extra time, slow down, save lives including yours. Depend on it. That is the Illinois Tollway If Only campaign. Okay, let's talk about a couple of things that Jim Duquette, who was our guest just now and has been a GM in 2 different organizations. He was a VP with the with the Orioles, and the GM of the New York Mets. And he likes the Cubs, says he thinks they're the best team in the division. He said they have to address the Steele loss. I don't know how they do that yet unless Javier Assad shows up here or my guy Chris Flexen.
He said something at the end that struck me. When he said his key to the whole thing in them being able to tread water and survive this is the bullpen stepping up, the thought that occurred to me was more innings out of the bullpen, right? Now that might go without saying, but specifically, maybe some of the starting depth that you don't, some of the spot starting depth, maybe that bolsters the bullpen. Maybe you get more multi-inning guys. Maybe that's a way to just to accumulate these innings you need to get. Because really, at the end of the day, it's a math problem with the innings, quality innings. And so if you can get somebody that can give you 2 1/3, 3 at a time from the bullpen, he can pitch every 3rd day, 4th day. Then maybe that's a help.
So watching 2 nights ago in the game that they beat the Padres, the bullpen was, I think, Merriweather, it was Porter Hodge, it was Ryan Presley, and then it was Caleb Thielbar. Bang, bang, boom. They did the job. They were outstanding, and the Cubs win the ball game in extra innings, 2-1. Really good. I think it was 2-1 final on the Nico Horner triple. Scored the ghost runner. But then you go to yesterday's game, and you're hanging right in the ball game, and guess what? You hand the ball to Luke Little.
You're talking to Padres, the last Padres game.
Yeah. When you hand the ball to Luke Little and he walk. Yeah. Why he's still in there, I don't know. Walk. They score an insurance run. Suarez is filthy, and you lose the game 4-2. They're an arm short.
Yeah.
Would you spend $10 million on David Robertson? Because I wouldn't. Not at this point. $10 million?
You know what? Yes, I would. Now that said, I don't know that you have to spend $10 million to get him.
That's what Jim was saying.
He wants to get paid like he got paid. He wants to get paid that was 8 figures. Okay, but by the time he's pitching for you, you're a month into the season plus. So, I mean, sign for a prorated deal. That's the equivalent of that.
Story.
But my point is, like, yes, I would spend the money because, as Theo Epstein once said, it's only money. You're not giving up the player capital that you're going to have to at the trade deadline. You're protecting that. And this guy is that good.
How long is it going to take him to be in major league pitching shape?
I don't know, but if it's,
we're coming up on May here.
Look, if it's a month, then you got him in a month. If you sit around and kick the can down the road and you decide you need him in a month, now it's 2 months.
Is he good enough?
He is that good.
He's old.
Look at his numbers last year.
As old as you.
Look at his numbers over the last 3. Yeah. And that now all of a sudden you lengthen that bullpen quite a bit. He's the best guy that's available out there that won't cost you player capital, and he's available now. You know what? I would assume they're on the phone to him. Now, whether that goes anywhere, who knows? But they know him. He's pitched for him already. He did a nice job for him. He's a good guy in the clubhouse. I would absolutely go after him.
You would?
Absolutely.
Why do you think he's not somewhere? With the lack of quality bullpen, why is he at home?
Because of what we talked to about Jim at one point on the podcast as well. There's a lot of teams that were holding back, that put limits on what they were spending per player, per need. A few teams, a handful of teams, 5 or fewer, spent money in the offseason. Everybody else took a kind of a tepid approach. Even some of the teams that consider themselves in it, and we've talked about the Cubs ad nauseum on this. As big a deal as Tucker was, that was a trade, and they still had money left over by the time you factored in the Bellinger deal. Mm-hmm. So they definitely did not go all in financially in the offseason. They were very tepid with their spending for a big market team that considers itself the division favorite, rightfully so, and a playoff team, rightfully so. They should have done more. We've talked about that.
Yeah, I made a call and asked somebody who's friends with Corbin Burns. If the Cubs had come correct and been there, he said, 0 chance. I said, why? He said he took less money to pitch for the Diamondbacks because his family's in Arizona. He said he was not – Baltimore offered more money, and he had a good experience there. He said he had talked to Corbin, and Corbin had said, I'm going to Arizona, man. My family's there. My house is there. I'm going to take what they offer. It'll be a fair deal, and I'm going there.
Yeah, well,
but there had to be somebody else.
That's what I'm saying. That's one pitcher, and those examples are out there. Those not maybe not every year, maybe every year, but those examples come up. If you're aggressive, if you're going into that marketplace aggressive, and you're saying we're going to spend every bit that we did last year, maybe even a little more because this season really is important, you would have got some more pitching. You would be in much.
Somebody out there.
There were. Max Fried was out there. So there were guys.
Max Fried got 210, I believe.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Max Fried would have been a magnificent signing.
Yeah. So there were guys out there, and you could go to the next level if you wanted. You could double up. They got Matt Boyd. That's a nice pickup.
That he was supposed to be covered for you, and now he's one of your best.
So go get 2 of those guys. Go get 2 or 3 of those guys.
Yeah, I wanted to look up while we were talking. But we're going to wrap it up on this while I look this up of the pitchers that signed that weren't like stupid expensive, but were expensive.
Well, look at the guy. You can argue whether you would have wanted him or not, but the guy that signed with Oakland early on in the process, that people were shocked that Oakland paid him. Is it Severino? Mm-hmm. So there's one for you. There were guys out there, guys that have track records, guys that you could expect some kind of baseline out of, innings out of.
You had Max Fried. He got 8 years, 218. You had Corbin Burns, and Max Fried is turning 32. He's 31 in 2 months. He turned 31 2 months ago. Corbin Burns, Blake Snell, Nathan Eovaldi, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, Yusei Kikuchi, Nick Pivetta, who's pitched great.
Pivetta's looked great. Now he turned down a qualifying offer.
The one I probably would have gone after, Jack Flaherty, got 2 years, 35.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of if pitching is a priority for you and you're willing to spend a little bit, that doesn't break the bank.
I'll give you another one. Walker Buehler got 1 year for 21.
That's a Matt Boyd type signing.
It is. He's coming back from injury. He pitched in the World Series in a bullpen role, but from the Dodgers. But there were some guys out there.
I thought he started in.
Maybe he did
in the World Series.
You also still had some veteran guys out there. Max Scherzer on a 1 year deal, got $15 million. Charlie Morton changed teams from Atlanta, went to Baltimore. He got 1 year, $15 million. Justin Verlander was out there. So there were Michael Lorenzen. I mean, there were just some names.
Even depth. Look, even lower level depth. The Cincinnati Reds went and spent a couple of $1 million on Wade Miley, coming off of Tommy John surgery. He's an older pitcher. It might be his last contract. Who knows? When he's been healthy in recent years, he has performed well. So that's all you need. You just need a guy who's not a AAA roll of the dice. You need a guy that can come in, and he'll be ready to pitch sometime in May. He already looked good in spring training. He pitched in spring training, looked good, and said, I could pitch now, but they won't let me, and so he's going to ramp up with a minor league rehab. Just a guy like that. If you knew you had a guy like that in your back pocket, you'd feel a little better right now.
You would. Gordon, thank you. A lot of fun.
All right. That was
great
good
stuff with a guy who's been a GM. So great to talk and get the perspective of Jim Duquette. I'll see you soon.
All right. See you
there he is, my partner, the great Gordon Wittenmeyer, here on our Cubs Recap Podcast, a presentation of our Recap YouTube channel and available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. It's brought to you by the Illinois Tollway, the If Only campaign. Folks, we need you. Please slow down out there. No hurry. Be careful. Drive safe. We'll see you the next time on the Cubs Recap Podcast. Take that.